So, the original plan for this channel was to make content that would be evergreen. Something that you could jump into at any point in Final Fantasy XIV's lifespan and get a good amount of context on what was happening at the time, but even if you didn't know everything that was happening or the context behind all the events, you could still have an enjoyable video. And while this video was originally supposed to be something else, that something else ran into development issues. And then the video that I was going to make to replace that became impossible because... yeah. So, fuck it. For once, I'll indulge myself and talk about current events. I can be hip and trendy, like all the other 14 creators. Why wouldn't I be able to? So, Evercold. It's, well, I have some thoughts. Don't worry, most of them are positive. There's a lot that Square Enix has already shown at the North American Fan Fest, to the surprise of literally everyone. And while most of it had me looking at the screen, pointing at the thing, and jumping up and down in excitement, a lot of it also raised some questions. Some of them are simple enough, and are definitely going to be answered relatively quickly. The sort of questions an excited child might ask before a big event. Things that will be answered soon enough, but I'm just so excited that I want to know the answer right now! But some of them are a bit more...
Do you believe in God, warrior?
Your streamlined job is going to be made even more streamlined. Simple rotation to be made even simpler. Being put in a box you have no control over. Forced to play second fiddle to a man with a shield. So I ask you again, warrior. When I pull this trigger, will you pray to God, or will you accept your fate? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's jump into the bit you've probably heard a lot about already. I could go over literally everything that Square Enix showed, but it would be 50 minutes of me sounding like, oh! Yeah! Oh my goodness, so cool! Woo! So instead of doing that, let's start with what might be the biggest thing. At least for me. Gearing has always kind of been a weird thing in Final Fantasy. You can get gear from multiple different things, however, they all require their own unique time investments. Dungeon gear may not drop the exact gear that you want, meaning you have to run the dungeon multiple times just to get that piece. And even then, you might have to roll against multiple people in the party. Tomes have a weekly cap on them, requiring you to do some pretty tedious activities to max them out. Alliance raids let you get one piece of gear for an entire run, and even then you have to roll against the whole group to potentially get the piece of gear that you might need. Genuinely, good luck if it's a highly sought-after glam piece. And Savage, while possibly the fastest method on paper, due to the entire tier being clearable in less than an hour, assuming that everyone plays perfectly in every fight, has a weekly lockout for the majority of the time that it is activated. Meaning that if you want to gear multiple jobs to best in slot, you are going to have to do the tier for a long amount of time. This leads to a pretty shitty situation where sometimes you want to check out a job in some content and you're just not really able to. Let's say that you just level Machinist to max level and want to see how it functions on more than just a training dummy. Well, you need to get gear for it through any of the methods that I mentioned above, or get crafted gear by making it yourself, which is a whole other problem, or fork out the guild to buy it off the market board. Multiply this by like 7 if you want to gear all of your jobs so you can go into whatever content that you need, and you'll find that some people burn themselves out before they even get to try the harder content. In Evercold, this system is being completely upended. Assuming that the jobs are the same level, whatever your highest item level job is, its gear will now be reflected onto any other job that you play. This is amazing! Do you know the amount of times I've seen a caster or a healer spot open in an extreme fight and I've just not been able to join because I don't have gear on those jobs? Now I can grief whatever party I want to with my amazing scholar gameplay. Leveling a new job means that you can just play it the moment that it's done, no longer deciding if you want to do any of the grinds to get the gear so you can continue playing it. There are a couple of extra things about this. Materia doesn't transfer over, which is the same way it works when you sink down to a different item level, meaning it's probably a good idea to get that job's best in slot if you're going to be playing it for a while. There's also the question of how things like stats work. Let's say if my tank is my highest item level job, does that suddenly mean that everyone has more tenacity? Or is it transferred to a stat that actually helps those jobs out more? That one I feel like we're just gonna have to wait and see when the expansion comes out. Alongside this, they decide to shoot another concept in the face with a giant gun. Tomes! The thing that were stuck on a weekly cap and a pain in the ass to finish every week are being obliterated and shot into the sun! The system currently works in such a way where if you want to get your best non-savage gear right now, you have to grind out a bunch of tomes from combat-related content. You can get 450 tomes a week, which is enough to buy an accessory. If you want bigger pieces though, like a chest piece or leggings, that'll cost you around 2 weeks worth of tomes. And the things that give you tomes are always kinda weird. You get tomes from unpatched dungeons, unpatched trials and raids, and other similar battle content. However, since it's always battle content related, if you're just not doing that, then you're not capping out your tomes. And even then, not all battle content gives you your tomes. Because of this, you'd find it's a very common thing for the week to end, and suddenly a bunch of players are running to cap their weekly tomes like their lives depend on it! It's a nightmare scenario, and honestly, it's exhausting. So what did Square Enix do? Son. They're getting rid of tomes, and instead, they're replacing it with a battle pass. The battle pass seems to give you an item in which you can trade for gear on a weekly system. How do you cap out the battle pass? Yes. We don't have all of the information on how this will work, but I can see the general vision. A world where big fishers, gold saucer enthusiasts, ultimate raiders, PvP fiends, and Mahjong gods could all cap out their tomes by doing the things that they want to do, that they love to do, instead of being forced to do something that they have to do. Hunt trains! Again, Square are allergic to specifics, probably because it's still early days, but I would hope that things are scaled to how hard it is to accomplish different tasks. Catch a normal fish? That's a couple of points. Catch a big fish? Now that's a bunch of points. Hit the cackpot? That's a good amount of points. Hit the jumbo cackpot? You're basically done for the whole week. Final Fantasy XIV is at its best when players are choosing what they want to do instead of doing what they feel like they have to do. And these two changes really make it feel like the designers are leaning into that. Play the job that you want to play in the content that you want to play, and get the job's gear by enjoying everything that the game has to offer. Dude, fuck yes. Finally, we move on to the new combat design. One of the biggest things that people have talked about is the complete removal of the 2-minute meta. And I'm personally neither here nor there about it. I think the 2-minute meta has pros and cons like any system. So it being gone isn't a massive downside or a massive boon for me. I do not weep or rage for it being sundered, but I will say I am very interested in the evolved job system. Every job in Evercold is getting some kind of rework, which aims to make them more unique, and that is something I can get behind. Mostly. With one pretty big exception, and we'll get on to it in a little bit. Let's start with the positive, though. It's all over my fucking screen. Dragoon and Bard both looked really cool in the showcase. I've never been a Fizz range enjoyer, and I personally think that those dots could last more than 3 seconds, but Bard's song shifting it between different rotations is a really cool idea. Not to mention the flip that allows you to get out of harm's way seems like a super useful tool, especially with how they've been designing fights recently. Dragoon was the real highlight of the show for me though. Distinguishing between left and right positionals, as well as having an actual jump that sends you up so high that you can't be seen anymore, makes the job look so much more fun compared to how it currently is. The 90% mitigation on a super jump as well gets my tank brain running. Like, what if we could deal with specific tank busters by working with our non-support players to use their special skills in a unique way? I could see something like Samurai having a souped-up version of Third Eye that causes them to do a slash through the boss for a bunch of damage. You know, like how they do in the Stormblood trailer. I have concerns about some of the DPS jobs, but for the most part, I'm very excited to see how things shape up. Considering the designer, Mr. Prime, has made the best iteration of a lot of DPS jobs in the past, I think we're in a good hand. Unfortunately, the supports are in another hand entirely. There's a lot here, so I'll start with the bit that I have very little to say about. White Mage. I don't play White Mage. I don't even have it unlocked. The reason I don't have it unlocked is because, to me, it seems pretty boring. After watching the showcase, my opinion on this has not changed. If anything, it's solidified. I think changing Glare to a button that instantly does damage isn't the best, and only having casts on healing for a magic job isn't that interesting. Healers still need to do damage in this game, just because that's how the fights are designed, and they don't want to punish players for having to GCD heal, which is fine, but I think they either need to make fights more demanding for healers, or they need to make healers' damage kits more interesting, and I don't think this is the way that you do it. My quote right now is, this is White Mage, aka, it's the simple baby healer that plays simply because, well, that's its job. If the GCD healing giving you more charges on a damage button and its main damage cast being essentially a fizz range button is unique to White Mage, then I think that's fine. However, if this is a reflection of how all of the healers are going to be, I don't really like this change. Granted, they did say they wanted to bring out the uniqueness in all of the jobs, but we'll just have to wait and see for more information. Personally, I'm more worried on what's going to happen to the rest of the healers than what's happened to White Mage, especially Astro. Since this whole thing is kind of giving people cards that buff them up, I, A, can't see how that will work effectively with so few buttons, and B, worry that the pivot away from party buffs will force them to change its entire identity again. Granted, if they turn it into a time mage, which it was kind of supposed to be, I wouldn't mind it too much, but we'll really have to see. And now we get on to my real gripe. The tanks. There's already been a lot of discourse about the tank changes, and I think that's for good reason. But I also need to acknowledge the shortcomings of the information that we know about. They've only shown Paladin, and gave us a lot of very vague information about how the tanks will be changed. And if I'm to be entirely honest, it soured me so much that I felt like I needed to make this. To begin with, the Paladin showcase looked bad. Like, I really didn't like it. Paladin is known to have a lot of button bloat right now, especially compared to the other jobs in the tank role. Hell, even compared to a lot of the DPS jobs, it has a lot of button bloat. So it being condensed down a lot is not really something that's a big deal for me. Neither is the rotational changes, if I'm honest. I think Gunbreaker right now is basically the only tank that has a super involved rotation. And while I do love my meter management on Warrior, I can also acknowledge that pressing one button differently every 30 to 60 seconds isn't exactly a high concept rotation. Alongside that, changing Paladin's burst from every 60 seconds to 40 seconds is... like, I don't really care. The only real issue I have with the rotation is that these gauges seem to just go up on their own. None of the jobs that Square Enix showed had auto attacks during the dev panel. And it's not said if they're completely gone or not, but if they are, then the oath gauge has just kind of lost the thing that made it unique, which sucks in my opinion. I should probably also mention this now because I just realized I didn't bring it up. I don't mind combos being reduced down to one button. We do lose a couple of small optimization things. For example, a lot of jobs have their one button come out really quickly, whereas the later buttons in their combo take time to charge up. meaning that if the boss is about to leave, doing 1 into 1 can actually be a tiny bit more optimal than finishing a full combo. But again, it's neither really here nor there. For the majority of players, this doesn't really matter, and even for me, it doesn't matter too much. But I do worry that it's going to make the filler rotations, especially for supports, feel less unique. Speaking of unique, Paladin actually lost a mitigation button. Bulwark, the button that makes you block anything that you receive, is completely gone from Paladin's toolkit. Several of the buttons have been merged, but they didn't mention if Bulwark had been merged into any different mitigation or not. Alongside this, Holy Sheltron now has a follow-up, where if you use it right as an attack hits you, you get a counterattack, with the damage being greater if you press it right before you get hit. A lot of people are super excited about this change, but I haven't seen anyone really point out that you should have already been doing this. Paladin, Warrior, and Gunbreaker all have extra mitigation on the first 4 seconds of their short cooldowns, meaning that if you press them right before you're about to take damage, you take way less damage. Gunbreaker and Paladin have a whole 30% mitigation for the first 4 seconds. That's more than Rampart. It's not the biggest thing in the world, I know, but it's something that good tanks should already be doing. Applying damage to it isn't something that massively changes how the job functions. It just gives them another GCD to press when it works. And even then, seemingly not every tank will have this feature, but I'm getting ahead of myself again. But the Bulwark removal is... okay, it's really messed me up. Like, if they're changing how many bits of mitigation that we have, this negatively impacts how much damage the bosses can do, right? Like, the last phase of M12 doesn't have a lot of tank busters, but the boss auto attacks do a ridiculous amount of damage, to the point where if you're the main tank, you're constantly rolling whatever mitigations you have just to survive. If I have less mitigations as a tank, does that mean that there's more times that I'm going to have to look at my healers with big old eyes and beg them to heal me? Or are the bosses just going to be doing less damage to the tanks overall? Either way, I don't really like it. It also concerns me that it's Bulwark, because despite being weird, it is the most unique mitigation that Paladin has, and I'm worried that every tank is going to lose their 60/90 second mitigation, which for some of the tanks definitely sucks, but for me is devastating. Please don't take away my Thrill of Battle. It's such a cool and unique button. Please don't get rid of it. But I might not have to worry about that at all. No, because every tank I play is suddenly being promoted. Warrior, Gunbreaker, and Dark Knight will now all have the new distinction of off-tank in the evolved mode, whereas Paladin and the new unrevealed tank are designated main tanks. Main tanks will be effective at taking damage to the face, whereas off-tanks will be better at mitigating damage taken by allies, as well as just generally lowering the damage that enemies do. We haven't seen any of the off-tanks in action, but the general idea is that they're not going to have that reflect type skill that Paladin has. And instead, they're going to have an attack that causes the enemy to do less damage. And honestly, I can't see this ending well. Like, at all. So, okay, we have two paths going forward. Either off-tanks are generally so bad at taking damage to the face from things like auto attacks and tank busters that we need a dedicated main tank to sit there and get smacked around by the boss, thus forcing a comp to always have a main tank. Or off-tanks are so good at mitigating party damage compared to the main tanks that it leads to a situation where you would rather just bring two of them to either overlap or stagger the party mitigation tools and deal with boss damage that way. And honestly, even though the main tank is classified as a main tank, I'd rather it be the second one, because that sounds so much more interesting than just reflecting damage back at the boss. Which, by the way, Warrior literally already does that, so why is it a fucking off-tank? Also, I need you to get real close for this one, like real close. It's important. I need you to be in so close so I can make sure that you hear this. Alright, are you ready? You're listening? Are you good? Okay, cool. If the difference between off-tank and main tank is that the main tank has a shield and the off-tank doesn't, I'm gonna eat everyone's job stones, so we all have to play our base classes. This feels like such a boring and uninspired reason to split them. It's so uncreative. Tanks block damage in different ways. Yeah, maybe the new tank uses double shield, or a shield and like a hammer or a flail or something, but everyone else is their own kind of shield. Warrior's body is the shield. Dark Knight's soul is the shield. And Gunbreaker... I get that it's just a way to divide the tanks, like how we have shield and pure healer. But it genuinely worries me that the design of the tanks are going to be more limited since they have to fit neatly into boxes now. I like that the tanks are currently flexible and just wish they had more to do when not actively taking damage. And I think a redesign for all of them could accomplish that without putting them into boxes. Everyone already has unique shared mitigations. Maybe add it so that they can give heavier mitigations to their allies that also share that heavy mitigation's unique effect. Could you imagine how powerful Warrior would be if it had Great Nebula's effect on them? Could you imagine how big the Shake It Off shield could be? It'd be so cool! Overall, the less mitigations and tanks being shoved into boxes has me worried. But then again, I'm hoping that the changes to some of the tank jobs, looking at you, Dark Knight, makes their damage rotations actually fun to do. As for Warrior... Okay, listen. Warrior's thing is that they can heal themselves, right? They're so healthy that they can't die. Which is, like, it's really cool. It's why I love the job. But I can't see how this is going to be a thing for an off-tank, because the whole thing is that you heal the main tank so much that they can't die. You're kind of just a healer at that point, and why? You're not a tank. So, without going into Doomer mode over this, I can't see Warrior keeping its current identity under the new system, and that's really depressing, considering that the last video I made was about how much I love the job. Like, it sucks. It just sucks. I hope whatever identity it gets next is at least cool. And I really hope I can still work it as a main tank. Obviously, Reborn mode will still exist, but it also sucks knowing that there's a bunch of new toys that you could play with, but if I want to play the job I've been playing since I started playing 14, in the position that I played it for 3 years at this point, I would have to forego my fancy new toys. Not to mention Square Enix blatantly said that Evolve mode is just more powerful. And I can't see this ending well, but we'll just have to wait until Berlin to see how it goes, I guess. Alright, lightning round of extra concerns, because this video is getting way too long. There's no AoE buttons. Does that mean that AoEs are now contextual, like other stuff? If so, ew. I don't like that. A lot of jobs have really small fun optimizations with 2 targets, like Gunbreaker's Fated Circle doing more damage on 2 targets when compared to Burst Strike, but doing less than Gnashing Fang. And also, if the AoE is contextual, am I going to have to hit 2 separate targets when there's only 2 enemies nearby? Or am I going to be forced to AoE when there's 2 enemies near me? Like, I don't want that. This was the expansion that gave us both Sugar Riot and the Extremes. They're cool because of how AoEs interact with a bunch of different things. Why would you... Why would you make them contextual now? For jobs that currently have split rotations that lead into single or multiple buffs, are they going to be able to jump between the new simplified rotations in order to reapply buffs to themselves, or are they going to be forced down a linear path that applies buffs to them? Alternatively, am I going to lose Storm's path because I really don't want to lose that button? I really like it. Is Ninja getting a full rework? Like, okay, it relies super heavily on the buff meta right now, and has a lot of buttons that are entirely just dedicated to summoning things, which gives it currently an identity. However, with buffs being removed and buttons being reduced, does that mean it's gonna have to change completely? Like, I know a lot of people who like the Mudra thing, and it would be cool if we kept that, but is it just gonna go now? I hope not. Along the same lines, is Dancer, like, kinda fucked now, or will it be the exception that allows it to hyper buff one specific job? I can't imagine Dancer without some kind of buff. Like, literally, Dance Partner is its core thing right now. I don't know how this is gonna work. Do you believe in God, Mr. Jollibee? Despite being a brand that originated in the Philippines and having locations in multiple countries, The Final Fantasy crossover is only allowed in America. Fried chicken eating shouldn't be restricted to just one data center. I could have biked over to my city center and eaten a Jollibee, but I'm not allowed to. So I ask you again, Mr. Jollibee, when I pull this trigger, will you pray to God, or will you accept your fate? Listen, I don't want to seem like I'm upset about Evercold. I'm genuinely really excited for this expansion. After years of the same system, having massive changes is gonna feel good no matter how it turns out. But considering how early it is in development, I think it's important now, more than ever, to air any concerns that you might have with the new systems. Since right now, they have the most amount of power to change everything. Once we get to something like the Media Tour, it's gonna be way too late. So it's on us, the community, to say what we feel at this moment. Like I said, I think all the DPS changes look really cool. I think playing DPS is gonna be super fun in the new expansion. I just want the support to also be fun. Granted, I have made the argument in the past that the fun of supports relies heavily on the fight design. And until we see how the fights play out in Evercold, we can't say for certain how things are really going to shape out. If I saw all of these changes at the end of Endwalker, I would be way more concerned than I am right now. But the battle team has impressed me so much with Dawn Trail that I'm willing to trust them when it comes to these changes. I still can't see the main tank and off-tank thing working well though. Hey, thank you for watching. I know this is very different to the other videos I've posted, and it's probably a little bit rougher on the editing, but I wanted to make sure I got this out in a timely manner. If you like the changes to Paladin, or the idea of the tanks being split into main and off-tank, good for you! This is a massive opinion piece, and it's just how I feel, as well as a couple of the opinions I stole from people in my static. Mainly my co-tank. We've both been kind of dooming about this situation. I'm super excited for whatever happens in Evercold, and I'm down for the ride. I'm just kind of worried I'm gonna have to play a job that isn't Warrior. If you enjoyed this video, why don't you subscribe down below, or even join? It would help me out financially, which I would really appreciate, because these videos take quite a while and end up being quite stressful near the end. I also have a Twitch now, where I stream 2 to 3 times a week. We generally just do casual stuff, and I get a chance to talk to you guys a little bit more informally. I also have the greatest VTuber avatar known to mankind, so you should come over and see how cool that is. Next video will hopefully be something a little bit less current topic-y, just because I want to make sure that I make interesting videos and not speculation stuff. This will hopefully be a one-off thing. But if you enjoyed it, please still subscribe down below. I got a lot of big plans for this channel, and all of your support makes me even more motivated to do them. So thank you all for watching. I'll hopefully see you all next time. Bye-bye!